These are 9 powdered foods that could be wrecking your health, and only 2 of them are actually safe to consume. What you're about to discover will completely change how you look at those convenient powder packets sitting in your pantry right now. Let's start with the most shocking revelation from recent testing. When Consumer Reports analyzed protein powders in 2025, they uncovered something terrifying. Nearly half of all protein powders tested contained dangerous levels of toxic metals, with some products exceeding safety thresholds by more than double what's legally allowed. But here's the kicker. The products marketed as the healthiest options were actually the worst offenders. You'd think organic, plant-based protein powders would be the safest choice, right? Dead wrong. These so-called clean options contained 3 times more lead than conventional whey products. Chocolate-flavored powders were even worse, packing 4 times more lead and up to 110 times more cadmium than vanilla varieties. We're talking about levels that are more than 10 times higher than what food safety experts consider safe for daily consumption. Tunde Akinleye, the food safety researcher behind this study, delivered a chilling assessment. It's concerning that these results are even worse than the last time we tested. The average level of lead is higher than what we found 15 years ago. Think about that for a moment. Despite all our advances in food safety and manufacturing, these products are getting more contaminated, not less. The heavy metals we're talking about aren't just mildly concerning. They're genuinely dangerous. Lead accumulates in your body and never leaves. Cadmium has a biological half-life of 10 to 30 years, which means once it enters your system, it's staying there for decades. These metals don't just float around harmlessly either. They interfere with brain function, damage your kidneys, and increase cancer risk. But protein powders are just the beginning of this powder problem. Let's talk about something millions of Americans use every single morning: powdered coffee creamer. That innocent-looking container sitting next to your coffee maker is actually a chemical cocktail designed to mimic real cream while delivering none of its benefits and plenty of harm. Powdered coffee creamer isn't made from cream at all. Instead, it's a highly processed concoction containing corn syrup solids, hydrogenated vegetable oil, sodium caseinate, dipotassium phosphate, sodium aluminosilicate, mono and diglycerides, cellulose gel, cellulose gum, carrageenan, artificial flavor, and artificial color. That's not a cream substitute. That's a chemistry experiment. The hydrogenated oils in these creamers contain trans fats, which the FDA has determined are not generally recognized as safe. These fats directly contribute to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, while raising your bad cholesterol levels. Mark Hyman, author of The Pegan Diet, puts it bluntly. Many coffee creamers out there are made of junk dairy from conventional cows that have been pumped full of antibiotics, which is then blended with artificial flavorings, inflammatory oils, and sweeteners. You absolutely want to avoid this. Here's something that'll blow your mind about powdered creamer. It's actually explosive. The Mythbusters team demonstrated how non-dairy coffee creamer can ignite an explosion thanks to its sodium aluminosilicate additive. If it can explode under the right conditions, what exactly is it doing inside your digestive system? Moving on to another powder that's hiding in plain sight, those seasoning packets that come with instant noodles. You might think the noodles themselves are the problem, but the real danger is lurking in that little flavor packet. A single serving of instant noodle seasoning contains between 14.5 and 21% MSG, along with a petroleum industry byproduct called tertiary butyl hydroquinone, or TBHQ. The sodium levels alone should terrify you. One package of instant ramen contains 1,760 milligrams of sodium. That's 88% of the World Health Organization's entire daily recommendation in just one meal. Consuming just one package per day makes it virtually impossible to keep your sodium intake within healthy limits. But the real concern is what Harvard researchers discovered about instant noodles and metabolic syndrome. Yun Shin, a doctoral candidate at Harvard School of Public Health, found a clear connection. Although instant noodle is a convenient and delicious food, there could be an increased risk for metabolic syndrome. The combination of processed ingredients, excessive sodium, and chemical preservatives creates a perfect storm for metabolic dysfunction. Now let's venture into territory that might surprise you: powdered eggs. These seem harmless enough, right? Just dehydrated eggs for convenience. But there's a hidden danger that most people never consider: cholesterol oxidation. When cholesterol is exposed to air and heat during the powder-making process, it transforms into something called cholesterol oxidation products, or COPs. These oxidized cholesterol compounds are far more dangerous than regular cholesterol. Current evidence shows that oxysterols are mutagenic, carcinogenic, cytotoxic, and immunosuppressive. They inhibit DNA synthesis, impair cell membrane function, and recent research suggests they play important roles in neurodegenerative diseases like Huntington's, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. The amount of oxidized cholesterol in milk powders can reach as much as 30 milligrams per gram. That's 3% of the total content. But powdered eggs are even worse because eggs naturally contain more cholesterol to begin with. When you eat powdered eggs, you're essentially consuming a concentrated dose of these harmful oxidized compounds. Perhaps even more insidious are the colorful powdered drink mixes that line grocery store shelves. Products like Crystal Light and Kool-Aid might seem like harmless ways to flavor water, but they're loaded with artificial sweeteners and chemical dyes that pose serious health risks. These mixes typically contain artificial sweeteners like acesulfame and sucralose. Acesulfame has been linked to cancer in laboratory studies, while research shows that sucralose can reduce beneficial gut bacteria, inhibit medication absorption, and release potentially toxic compounds when heated in your body. Dr. Uma Naidu, a Harvard nutritionist, warns that just because it's 0 calories does not make it a healthy food. Your body may be getting hydrated, but it may be affecting you in a bad way somewhere else. The food dyes are equally concerning. Yellow 6 and red 40, common ingredients in these mixes, are known carcinogens. These synthetic colors have been banned in several European countries due to safety concerns, yet they remain freely used in American products. What's particularly troubling is that these dyes offer no nutritional value whatsoever. They exist purely for aesthetic appeal while potentially damaging your health. Dr. Naidu argues that these products represent false hydration. I'd argue that this is not real hydration. It's just a different form of drinking a sweet beverage like diet soda. You're tricking your brain into thinking you're making a healthy choice while actually consuming a cocktail of artificial chemicals. One of the most heartbreaking categories on our list involves the youngest and most vulnerable consumers: powdered infant formula. While formula can be a life-saving necessity for many families, the powder form carries unique contamination risks that liquid formula doesn't face. The primary concern is a bacteria called Chronobacter, which thrives in dry environments and can contaminate powdered infant formula during manufacturing, storage, or preparation. Over 90% of Chronobacter infections have been epidemiologically linked to powdered infant formula. These infections are rare, but when they occur in newborns, they can be devastating or even fatal. The statistics are sobering. In 2022, 4 cases of Chronobacter infections in infants, resulting in 2 deaths, triggered a massive recall of Abbott nutrition formula products. The contamination was so severe that the FDA had to shut down Abbott's Sturgis, Michigan facility for months, creating a nationwide formula shortage that put countless families at risk. More recently, the ByHeart infant formula outbreak has sickened 51 babies across 19 states since December 2023. FDA testing revealed that contaminated powdered whole milk used in the formula was the likely source of botulism contamination. In January 2026, health officials confirmed that the type of bacteria causing this illness was found in 2 samples linked to the formula. The fundamental problem is that powdered infant formula is not sterile. Unlike liquid formula, which undergoes sterilization processes, powder cannot be heat-treated to the same degree without destroying its nutritional properties. This creates an inherent vulnerability to bacterial contamination that puts the most vulnerable population, newborn babies, at risk. Chronobacter became a nationally notifiable condition in 2024, which means healthcare providers must now report cases to public health authorities. This change reflects growing recognition of the severity of these infections and the need for better surveillance and prevention. Another powder hiding dangers in plain sight is whole milk powder. Unlike the Chronobacter risks we see with infant formula, whole milk powder's primary threat comes from the same cholesterol oxidation we discussed with powdered eggs, but with an important distinction. Whole milk powder contains significant amounts of cholesterol that become oxidized during the drying process. These oxidized cholesterol products may damage blood vessels and promote heart disease. The oxidation occurs when cholesterol molecules react with oxygen during the high-heat drying process, creating compounds that are far more harmful than natural cholesterol. The good news is that this problem has a simple solution, which brings us to our first safe option: non-fat or skim milk powder. By removing the fat content before drying, non-fat milk powder eliminates virtually all cholesterol and eliminates the risk of consuming oxidized cholesterol products. Non-fat milk powder actually offers substantial nutritional benefits. It's a source of high-quality protein with amino acids that are readily digestible and completely bioavailable. The whey protein that represents 20% of the protein in milk powder is particularly valued for its health-enhancing properties. These powders are also rich in soluble vitamins and minerals, including calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. This brings us to our second and final safe option: whey protein isolate. While most protein powders failed Consumer Reports safety tests, there's a clear pattern in the products that passed. 5 out of 5 of the top products with the lowest heavy metal content were either pure, pro, or 100% whey protein powder supplements. The Clean Label Project maintains a list of 16 protein powders that showed no detectable levels of lead, cadmium, mercury, or arsenic. The vast majority of these safe products are whey proteins. This makes sense when you understand the source. Whey is a byproduct of cheese manufacturing, and the processing required to isolate whey protein effectively filters out many contaminants that plague plant-based alternatives. The contrast is striking. While plant-based protein powders averaged 9 times more lead than dairy-based products, pure whey protein isolates consistently showed the lowest contamination levels. This doesn't mean all whey products are safe. Plenty of whey blends and concentrates still failed testing, but isolated whey proteins appear to be the safest category among protein supplements. So why are so many powdered foods contaminated while others remain safe? The answer lies in processing methods, source materials, and contamination pathways. Plant-based protein powders often source materials from soil that may contain heavy metals, and the plants naturally absorb these contaminants from their environment. Chocolate flavoring compounds the problem because cacao plants are particularly efficient at absorbing heavy metals from soil. Manufacturing processes also matter enormously. The high heat drying required to create powders can concentrate contaminants while simultaneously creating oxidation reactions that transform harmless compounds into dangerous ones. That's why cholesterol becomes problematic in powdered eggs and whole milk powder, but remains safe in liquid form. Cross-contamination during manufacturing presents another risk factor. Facilities that process multiple products may inadvertently transfer contaminants between product lines. The lack of federal oversight compounds these problems. The FDA doesn't review, approve, or test supplements like protein powders before they reach store shelves, and there are no federal limits on heavy metal content in these products. The regulatory gap is particularly concerning given the explosive growth in this market. Powder and ready-to-drink protein sales have reached over $32 billion globally, yet these products face less regulatory scrutiny than many other foods. Jacqueline Bowen from the Clean Label Project captures the scope of the problem. Heavy metal contaminant is a global food safety problem. These contaminants are basically everywhere, including in things that are being represented as health foods. This irony runs throughout the powder industry. Products marketed as health foods often contain the highest levels of harmful contaminants. Organic products, despite their premium pricing and health halo, showed 3 times more lead and twice the cadmium compared to conventional alternatives. The natural and clean labels that attract health-conscious consumers often mask products with worse contamination profiles than their conventional counterparts. What makes this situation particularly insidious is that these health risks are invisible and cumulative. You can't taste heavy metals in your protein shake. You can't see the oxidized cholesterol in powdered eggs. You can't detect the artificial chemicals in flavored drink mixes. These substances accumulate in your body over time, potentially causing damage years or decades before symptoms appear. The good news is that awareness is growing. The Clean Label Project found significant improvement in BPA contamination between their 2018 and 2023 studies, dropping from 55% of products containing BPA to only 3 out of 160 products. This shows that when public attention focuses on specific contaminants, manufacturers can and do respond. But improvement in one area doesn't guarantee safety across the board. While BPA levels decreased, heavy metal contamination actually got worse over the past 15 years. This suggests a whack-a-mole approach to food safety, where solving one problem may inadvertently create or reveal others. For consumers trying to navigate this contaminated landscape, the safest approach involves understanding contamination patterns and making strategic choices. If you're a chocolate lover, switching to vanilla-flavored products can dramatically reduce your exposure to heavy metals. If you use protein powder, dairy-based options generally show lower contamination than plant-based alternatives, though individual products vary significantly. For coffee, abandoning powdered creamer in favor of simple half and half eliminates an entire category of artificial additives. Half and half contains only milk and cream, no corn syrup, no hydrogenated oils, no mysterious chemical stabilizers. It's lower in saturated fat than heavy cream, while being free of the additives that make powdered alternatives so problematic. The instant noodle situation requires more dramatic changes. There's no safe level of consumption for foods containing petroleum byproducts and excessive sodium. The convenient promise of instant noodles comes at too high a health cost to justify regular consumption. Kathy McManus, director of the Department of Nutrition at Harvard-affiliated Brigham and Women's Hospital, offers this perspective on protein powders specifically. I don't recommend using protein powders except in a few instances, and only with supervision. Her caution reflects a growing understanding among nutrition experts that whole foods offer protein without the contamination risks of processed alternatives. The broader lesson here extends beyond individual food choices to how we think about processed foods in general. Powdering, while offering convenience and shelf stability, often concentrates harmful compounds while destroying beneficial ones. The processing required to create stable powders frequently involves high heat, chemical additives, and extended storage periods that create opportunities for contamination and degradation. This doesn't mean all powdered foods are inherently dangerous, but it does mean we should approach them with informed skepticism. The 2 safe options on our list, non-fat milk powder and whey protein isolate, succeed because their processing either eliminates risk factors or the source materials are inherently cleaner. As consumers become more aware of these issues, we're likely to see continued evolution in the powder industry. Some manufacturers are already responding to contamination concerns by improving sourcing, implementing better testing protocols, and reformulating products to reduce harmful additives. The challenge moving forward is balancing convenience with safety. Powdered foods serve real needs. They're shelf-stable, portable, and often more affordable than fresh alternatives. The goal isn't to eliminate all powdered foods, but to ensure that when we choose them, we understand the trade-offs involved. The research reveals a troubling pattern where the foods marketed most aggressively as healthy options often carry the highest health risks. This inverse relationship between marketing claims and actual safety should make us all more skeptical of processed food marketing, regardless of how many buzzwords like organic, natural, or clean appear on the package. What's particularly concerning is that many people consume these products daily, believing they're making healthy choices. Someone drinking a plant-based protein shake every morning, thinking they're avoiding the perceived dangers of dairy, may actually be exposing themselves to far higher levels of toxic metals than if they'd chosen a simple whey isolate. The infant formula situation represents perhaps the most tragic aspect of this powder problem. Families who depend on formula have few alternatives, yet the powder form carries inherent contamination risks that liquid formula doesn't face. This creates an impossible situation where parents must choose between convenience, cost, and safety for their most vulnerable children. Looking at these 9 powdered foods together reveals systemic issues in how we process, regulate, and market convenience foods. The fact that contamination levels have worsened over the past 15 years, despite increased awareness of food safety issues, suggests that current regulatory approaches aren't adequate to protect consumers. The solution requires action at multiple levels. Manufacturers need to implement better sourcing and testing protocols. Regulators need to establish meaningful safety standards for heavy metals and other contaminants. And consumers need better information to make informed choices about the products they purchase. Until these systemic changes occur, your best protection comes from understanding contamination patterns and making strategic choices. Choose vanilla over chocolate when possible. Select dairy-based over plant-based protein when using supplements. Avoid artificial additives when natural alternatives exist. And remember that convenience foods, no matter how they're marketed, can never fully replace the safety and nutrition of whole, unprocessed alternatives. The research is clear. 7 of the 9 powdered foods we examined pose significant health risks, while only 2 can be considered relatively safe. This ratio should give us all pause about our relationship with processed convenience foods and remind us that in nutrition, as in life, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.